Hi, I'm Shan Wu with a Undercolor of Law hot take on federal judge Michael Ponsor's apology for having criticized Supreme Court Justice Alito. Now, Judge Ponsor's apology is an example of everything that is wrong in our judicial system. So let's break it down a little bit. He's a senior judge appointed by President Clinton, I think. And so he was found to have violated the federal judiciary's ethics code, and he was basically disciplined by his chief judge, because the way it works in the districts is the chief judge of the district has this sort of administrative role for the other judges. Much like, theoretically, Chief Justice Roberts could exercise that over the other Supreme Court justices. Never happens, right? So here's what did happen here. Judge Ponsor had written a New York Times opinion piece criticizing Justice Alito for those flags that had been flown at Alito's house. Those are flags associated with the Musk administration's MAGA supporters who attacked the Capitol. I meant the Trump administration. And the judge got in trouble for penning this opinion piece in the New York Times. And what is it that he wrote that deserved this sanction or rebuke? Well, we'll put it up for you on the screen. Take a look at it. And he says that he can't offer any opinion as to whether the flag display was unlawful, and he doesn't even opine whether if the upside-down flag was a violation of the Code of Judicial Ethics. So notice he's not actually saying that Alito had violated the ethics code, but he goes on to say, to me, the flag issue is much simpler. The fact is that regardless of its legality, displaying the flag in that way at that time shouldn't have happened. To put it bluntly, any judge with reasonable ethical instincts would have realized immediately that flying the flag then and in that way was improper and dumb. So I would agree with that. At the time, there was a lot of controversy about flying the flag, and we'll talk more about why that was going on at that time and why it was controversial. And he went on to say that, quote, courts work because people trust judges. Taking sides in this way erodes that trust. So let's remember for a moment why we were thinking about how it showed he was taking sides. Obviously, people may not like the fact that it seems like he is supporting those particular folks who want to fly that flag, symbolizing they wanted to overturn the election and attack the Capitol. But if you listen to things that were being said at the time, it gives us the context for what happened. So take a listen here.
What we are seeing here is an extraordinary breach of not just the trust and the stature of the Supreme Court, but we are seeing a fundamental challenge to our democracy. Samuel Alito has identified himself with the same people who raided the Capitol on January 6th and is now going to be presiding over court cases that have deep implications over the participants of that rally.
Now, at the time, I also wrote on this also and talked about in my opinion piece in the Daily Beast that when a sitting Supreme Court justice aligns themselves with Stop the Steal believers, that's a no-brainer. We'll put that up for you. Take a look at that old piece I did. It's a no-brainer that a judge with those sympathies should not be sitting in cases involving prosecutions of the January 6 rioters, those charged with interfering in the 2020 election, including defendant Trump. And I cited to a federal law, 28 U.S.C. section 455, which actually is a law that says shall. It's not a discretionary issue. It says, quote, any justice, judge, or magistrate judge of the United States has to recuse themselves, disqualify themselves in the following circumstances. If they have a personal bias or prejudice concerning a party or personal knowledge of the dispute. So this does not get enforced against Supreme Court justices. And what got enforced here against Judge Ponsor was the federal Judicial Ethics Code based on a complaint against him that was made by a MAGA person, an ally of Trump's. So you can take a look at the article here that talks about that. And the federal judge, the chief judge, who sanctioned Judge Ponsor, takes the position that Ponsor's writing that editorial undermined faith in the judiciary. So seriously, it's a kind of interesting turn of events, right? If you talk about somebody who is doing something that in your opinion is bad for the judiciary, then you yourself get accused of undermining the judiciary. So let's take a look at what that chief judge was saying. I will put up his opinion here, or his finding. And he writes that Ponsor was at all times respectful of the judicial complaint process, responsive to the concerns raised by his essay, and reflective in drafting the attached letter in which he publicly acknowledges and apologizes for his violations of the Code of Conduct. I am satisfied that Judge Ponsor's public letter of apology constitutes voluntary corrective action sufficient to allow for the conclusion of the complaint. Now, I actually defend a lot of college students. This reminds me a lot of when they're talking about a college student has acknowledged their errors. It's a very paternalistic sounding type of reprimand here. However, this judge, who even though he's a senior judge, was very obedient here and apologized. The irony of the apology, though, is not lost on a lot of people. I think we're going to put up this quote for you from the Above the Law column, and I'll read along with you. So what's great about this as you look at the screenshot is, quote, a federal judge has been found to have engaged in conduct, quote, prejudicial to the effective and expeditious administration of the business of the courts for pointing out that Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito engaged in that same conduct. So that's the irony, right? And then let's take a look at Judge Ponsor being a very good judge and apologizing. He writes, Dear Chief Judge Diaz, thank you for your recent letter pointing out how my New York Times essay on May 2nd, 24 was improper, basically. He talks about the fact that he now understands that questioning the ethical judgment of a Supreme Court justice might have had the effect of undermining the public's confidence in the integrity of the judicial system. And there's a particular violation for the federal judges that he feels this may have run afoul of. So he apologizes for that. And he says in the future, he will make sure before he undertakes any public speakings or position that he's going to run that by the chief judge and their ethics committee to make sure that it's okay to do that. Right, so that's all fine and dandy, although the letter has a little bit of a tone of, I'm sorry, Dad, I'm sorry I got caught kind of thing. So it's fine he did that, but the criticism of Alito at the time, as we've talked about, was because he's basically showing support for the people who are attacking the Capitol. Let's listen to the way that the MAGA world was spinning the criticism of him at that time. Take a quick listen here.
You know, I'm interested in the timing of these attacks on Justice Alito, because one references a flag flown more than 4 years ago. One references a flag flown more than 1 year ago. And all of a sudden, this comes out just now.
I think specifically why now the Supreme Court is considering two cases, both of which affect Donald Trump and hundreds of January 6 defendants. The first case is a case in which the Supreme Court, I suspect, will find that presidents of any party have to have presidential immunity to some degree from criminal prosecution. That could shut down the cases against Donald Trump. A second case is about the Department of Justice under Joe Biden stretching laws to the breaking point to prosecute hundreds of January 6 defendants for crimes that are not really what Congress intended. Both of those cases are going to come down in the next month. I suspect the New York Times and Democrats are once again targeting Justice Alito because they want to undermine the court's credibility.
So that's a great example of misleading information. The whole point is that the cases are before the court. That's exactly right. That's why it was controversial at the time. And that Alito was expressing an opinion that should require him to recuse himself because it sounds like he's favoring one side or the other. That's what the controversy was about. Of course, he did not recuse himself, and guess which way those cases came out, both of them that they talk about. Well, The real question is not why the controversy arose then. The real question is, why didn't he recuse himself, and why can't he be forced to be disqualified? So this federal judge, Ponsor, is not allowed to talk about this. He's going to be disciplined. But it's perfectly fine for Justice Alito to not only not recuse, but he can talk about what he wants. Put this up for you. This was the Wall Street Journal, where he does an editorial himself, an opinion piece, where he criticizes a news outlet, ProPublica, for being misleading, for daring to criticize him. So that's why this is everything that's wrong with the system here. The lower court federal judges, honorable people, they also have accountability to a chief judge. They have to follow these ethics rules. There is zero accountability for the Supreme Court. They can do what they want. Their own ethics code, self-enforcing, no one can enforce it against them, and they get to say whatever they want when they feel like saying it. So what's the solution? Reform the court by all means. We have to have a meaningful ethics code, some kind of accountability. If they won't police themselves, statute can be rewritten in a way that it could be policed by others. There could be a rotating system where they wouldn't be Supreme Court justices for life. Congress should act there. DOJ should act. I've said that for a long time. And in the meantime, obviously, that's not going to happen in the next 4 years. So what can we do? Keep calling them out. Shine the light on them all the time. All of the indiscretions. Push, support the investigative reporting. We have to keep putting this out so they can't hide in the shadows about it. And maybe there's nothing that happens right now with DOJ. Nothing that happens with Congress. But we'll keep talking about it. We won't let this just die out. That's it for now. We'll talk to you soon. And thanks again for all the replies and the comments. They're really helpful to get.
In collaboration with the Midas Touch Network, we just launched the Legal AF YouTube channel. Help us build this pro-democracy channel where I'll be curating the top stories at the intersection of law and politics. Go to YouTube now and free subscribe at Legal AF MTN. That's at Legal AF MTN.